where you have old vine for most of the way, and then new young vine that would be coming out of the ground. As that comes around here and then would be buried in the ground, you would only have to put papers on this new side here on the smooth bark young vine. You wouldn't have to put papers on the old rough bark stuff. The papers are protected in the springtime when I come to do berm sprays with Roundup, that any of the new shoots that would be coming off of these would be protected by the paper rather than killing the new young vine. As we showed you earlier about layering the new young vine, that first year it'll have a smooth bark cane that runs up the stake. The second year, this is what it looks like. It'll have rough bark, it'll be about 1 inch across, and at this point we want to start developing the new head. We want to leave just a couple of spurs, 2 or 3 spurs, and then cut the rest off so that you only have the spurs in this area. That's right where we want them, about 1 foot to 24 inches down from the top wire. That'll be the new head for next year. On the old vine this year, we only leave fruiting canes, no spurs, because these are our spurs. This is the new head. Then next winter, we'll cut off this old trunk and have the brand new vine here. This is the 3rd year vine, the finished product, where we've cut off the old trunk. We leave 2 or 3 spurs, 4 canes, and this is a beautiful young vine. You only want to leave 4 canes as a maximum on young vines, because they will have a tendency to overcrop, because these younger vines are more prolific than the older vines. Now, the first thing you want to do in the pruning itself, after you've determined that you're going to make a runner, is getting the old growth off the wire. This is called brushing out. These were the fruiting canes from last year. Now they're spent and we need to get rid of them. The only thing that grows the fruit are the smooth bark canes. No fruit will grow on this rough bark. Like I said, it had its time last season and now it's spent and we need to get rid of it. So as each one of these old canes that have rough bark come up to the wire, right at the wire, we want to sever them. Even if they had good canes out on the end of the rough bark, I don't want a good cane that goes halfway to the next vine. We want to be building back to the center or head of the vine, back in this area here, and so we want to get rid of all that woody growth up on the top. The vine has a tendency to want to have woody growth keep going up and up and up. We have to keep hacking it back down to a renewal area in this area. So each of the old canes from last season we need to sever from the wire and then pull the old stuff off the wire and throw it into the brush row, not into the cover crop row. The cover crop I plant so that in a couple more months I can disc in and add organic material to the soil. The clippings we also shred up and then disc in the soil, and both of those, almost like a time release program, the clippings are available to us is fertilizer available to us in 3 to 6 months, and it also improves the soil tilth, helps the sandy areas to hold more water and the clay areas to have better water penetration. So anyway, getting rid of the old stuff. As you follow each of these down, if there's no good canes on them, you go right back to the trunk. Or until you do come to a good cane, such as this one, you come back here to where you do have some good canes. And you do that with each of the old fruiting canes. And on these, I always want to put the hook of my shears in between what I'm cutting and the wire, and never say, well, I'm going to stop when I get to the wire. because you clip that wire, or even if you just put a little nick in it, then after a couple of years it rusts, and then that breaks at that nick. And I like to cut and snip this old growth off a lot more than yanking and pulling, because the yanking and pulling, we break stakes, and you whip yourself in the face if you do a lot of yanking and pulling. If you do feel like you have to yank and pull on stuff, pull sideways rather than out. Again, pulling out, you'll break stakes, you whip yourself in the face. So now we get down to an area, and up until now, on the brushing out, that's what everybody teaches. But now I want to show you a couple of things that I've observed here and prayerfully thought out, that we can make this a lot easier on our members and prepare for the future as well. And hopefully have an easier time at picking and everything else. Anyway, there's one more I forgot here. Okay, so most people when they teach you, they say, okay, now pick your 6 best canes. And by the way, when we tell you 6 canes and 4 spurs, that's a maximum. That's a guideline. If there aren't 6 canes there, if all your 6 canes are barely big enough to reach the wire, well then cut off all of them but 2. Leave me 2 canes that will just barely reach the wire, and leave me a couple of spurs in the right area, and go from there. Don't try and force 6 canes on a vine to overproduce it one more year, to make it, the plant put all its energy into the fruit instead of rebuilding the trunk. So again, that 6 canes, that's as a maximum. So what I want to do here, again, this is different than anybody will ever teach you, but what I want to show you is to leave your spurs first rather than canes, and to leave your spurs in specific areas. For example, I only want the spurs to be about 12 to 24 inches from that top wire. I don't want spurs way up at the top. I don't want spurs way down at the bottom. I don't want spurs way out halfway to the next vine. I want the spurs right here in this area, and maybe at the most a foot, 1.5 feet away from the stake. It's better not to have any spurs at all than to leave them in a wrong place. But so again, if we'll choose the spurs first in the area where we want spurs and future growth, that will be the best for the vine. And so if I leave 2 to 3 spurs, and by the way, a spur is a cane that you've cut off at 2 joints. This would have been a fruiting cane, but we've cut it back to 2 joints, and this is a replacement spur. The shoots that grow off of this for next winter will be fruiting canes. We're preparing for the future by leaving these spurs. Now, if all you leave me is 2 spurs on any vine, that's plenty. As I mentioned before, 4 is a maximum. If we leave too many spurs, that grows vegetative growth mostly. It robs the plant of energy that we would have put up into the fruit or into the growth of the cane and trunk itself. So 2 spurs is fine, maybe at the most 3 or 4. But again, only in this area. Now anything else you leave, you either leave as a cane or you cut off completely and make close cuts. And for example, if I'm wanting to cut off this bud right here and I go like this, that's still a spur. It's a short, inadvertent spur, but it still has buds that will push. If I'm wanting to get rid of that, I need to put my blade side next to what I'm cutting and cut it off flush so I don't have buds left behind. So again, the spurs and the placement of the spurs is most important, even more so than